I wasn't supposed to be out there that night. The rain was coming down hard, stinging my face like 1,000 needles as I pulled my jacket tighter around me. My boots squelched against the muddy trail, but I didn't care. I needed the air even if it was heavy with mist and the scent of pine. Sometimes the only way I could quiet the noise in my head was to walk. Walk until my legs ached. Walk until the memories dulled. Walk until the hollow place in my chest felt less like a gaping wound and more like something I could live with. I'd taken this path dozens of times before. It curled around the edge of the old military base, cutting through a stretch of woods that felt almost untouched. At this hour, the streets were empty, and the only sounds were the drumming rain and the occasional whisper of wind. I told myself I was safe. But then I heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind. A faint, high-pitched sound swallowed by the storm. I stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath with me. The rain pattered against the hood of my coat water, trickling down my neck. There it was again. A cry. Small. Weak. Desperate. It froze me in place. It wasn't an animal. I knew that much. Hello. My voice cracked as it left my throat. I strained my ears, scanning the darkness ahead. Nothing but shadows and the thrum of rain. I should have kept walking. I should have turned around. But my feet moved before my mind could catch up. I stepped off the trail, my boots sinking into wet leaves as I pushed through the underbrush. Branches scratched at my arms, cold rain seeping through the fabric of my sleeves. The sound came again, louder this time. A baby. God. I felt my stomach lurch. My pulse slammed in my ears as I shoved past a fallen log, and then I saw it. A small shape tucked beneath the shelter of a pine tree. A blanket, thin, sodden, barely covering a tiny bundle. My heart dropped. I stumbled forward, nearly falling to my knees in the mud. My hands shook as I reached for the bundle, peeling back the wet fabric. A baby girl. Her lips were pale, her face blotchy from crying. Her tiny fists trembled against the cold air. Oh God. Oh no. The words tumbled out in a whisper as I scooped her up, clutching her close. She was ice cold. I could feel her fragile breaths against my chest, uneven and shallow. Panic clawed at my throat. My phone, where was my phone? I fumbled in my pocket, my fingers slick with rain. No signal. Of course. Out here there was nothing. I looked down at her again, her cries fading to soft whimpers. She didn't have time for me to figure this out. She needed warmth. She needed something I wasn't sure I could give. I wasn't supposed to be out there that night. But maybe I was exactly where I needed to be. She was so small. Too small. Her tiny face scrunched as she let out another weak cry, so faint it barely rose above the rain. I tightened my arms around her, pressing her against my chest. My jacket was soaked through, but I tried to shield her from the downpour with what little warmth I had left. It's okay. It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you. My voice shook. She didn't stop crying, but it was softer now. Like even that took more strength than she had left. I needed to get her warm. Now. But how? There was no signal on my phone. The nearest house was half a mile back, and she didn't look like she could wait that long. Her tiny fingers twitched against my coat, clutching weakly at the fabric. And suddenly it hit me. The ache in my chest. The one that had never really gone away, no matter how many months had passed since the hospital, since the silence of an empty crib. I still had milk. Of course I did. For months, my body had betrayed me, clinging to a role it no longer needed to play. I'd tried to ignore it, to shut it down, but it hadn't stopped. And now this little girl needed what I thought I would never give again. I hesitated, the rain stinging my face as I knelt under the pine branches. I can't do this, I whispered, though there was no one to hear me but her. But her lips brushed against my collarbone, seeking instinctive. Her tiny mouth opened in a searching motion. She was starving. And something deep inside me, something I thought had died, moved. I shifted her carefully in my arms, pulling her closer, fumbling with trembling hands to undo the buttons of my damp shirt. Please, please take it, I murmured, my voice breaking. Her mouth found me almost instantly, and then, miracle of miracles, she latched. A sound escaped my throat. Half sob, half laugh. That's it. That's it, baby girl. The cold around me seemed to fade as warmth bloomed between us. Not much, but enough. Enough to keep her alive for another minute. Her sucking grew steadier, her tiny hand pressing against my skin. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't wipe them away. She was here. She was breathing. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. I didn't know who had left her there. I didn't know why she was alone in the freezing rain, but I knew one thing. As long as she was in my arms, I wouldn't let her go. By the time I reached the small clinic on Maple Street, my arms felt numb. The baby stirred weakly against my chest, her tiny breath fogging my damp shirt. She hadn't made a sound in the last 5 minutes, and that scared me more than her cries ever could. The door creaked open with a push of my shoulder. "Help someone, please." My voice cracked hoarse from the cold air and panic. A nurse in blue scrubs rushed from behind the counter. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of me, soaked to the bone, clutching a limp newborn. "She was in the woods," I gasped. "She's freezing." I don't know how long she'd been there. The nurse ushered me into an exam room. Moments later, a doctor arrived, already pulling on gloves. "Lay her here," he said briskly, gesturing to the table. I hesitated, arms tightening around her small frame. "It's okay," he said softer this time. "We'll take care of her." Reluctantly, I placed her down. The baby let out a faint whimper. It was so soft I almost didn't hear it. "She's severely hypothermic," the doctor muttered under his breath. "We'll need to warm her slowly." A heat lamp clicked on overhead, casting a gentle glow over her damp, flushed skin. A nurse wiped her down with a warm towel. Another prepared a tiny bottle of formula. "Let's see if she'll eat," the nurse said. But when they touched the bottle's nipple to her lips, she turned her head away. "Try again," the doctor urged. They did. Once. Twice. She refused. Her cries were weak, fading. "She's hungry," I whispered. "She has to be." The nurse looked up, hesitating. "You said you breastfed her before I froze." "Yes," I admitted. "Out there, it was the only thing I could do." "She might need you to try again," the nurse said gently. "It could make the difference." I swallowed hard. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. But the thought of her slipping away? No, I couldn't let that happen. "Okay," I murmured. "I'll do it." They handed her back to me, wrapping her in a fresh blanket. The moment her skin touched mine again, her cries quieted. She latched almost immediately, as though she'd been waiting for me. My throat tightened. "That's it," I whispered, stroking the fine hair on her head. "You're safe now." As her sucking slowed, I realized she didn't even have a name. "Do you know her name?" I asked softly. The nurse shook her head. "No one's reported a missing baby matching her description." I looked down at her delicate features, her tiny hand clutching the edge of my shirt. "Then, until we find out, I'll call her Lily." It felt strange saying it aloud, like naming her gave her roots. And maybe gave me roots too. The clinic was quiet that night. The nurses had dimmed the lights in the room, leaving only the soft hum of machines and the faint glow of the heat lamp above us. I sat in a rocking chair, Lily nestled against my chest. She had finally stopped crying. Her tiny face was relaxed now, lips parted slightly as she slept. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out in a shaky sigh. I should have felt relief. She was safe, warm, breathing. But instead, I felt something heavier settling in my chest. Fear. I glanced at the little bundle in my arms. The weight of her was so small, barely there. Yet it felt like she was anchoring me to the floor, tethering me to a place I wasn't sure I wanted to be. She wasn't mine. She never would be. I'd told myself that over and over since I stepped into the clinic, but my heart refused to listen. It was happening again. The same dangerous attachment, the same whispers in my head. What if you let yourself love her? What if she's taken from you too? I tightened my arms around her, pressing my cheek to her soft hair. Her scent, sweet, faintly powdery, hit me like a memory I'd tried to bury. Micah. My son had smelled like that too. The day they placed him in my arms, swaddled in blue, his skin still so warm I thought I'd never let go. But hours later, I had no choice. He was gone before I ever had a chance to know him. I blinked hard, fighting the sting in my eyes. Don't do this, Haley. Don't make her your whole world. Not again. But then Lily stirred in her sleep. Her tiny fingers curled, clutching weakly at the fabric of my shirt, as if she didn't care about my fears, as if she had already decided I was hers. I stayed like that for hours, rocking, humming, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. It felt dangerous, not because of her, because of me. By the time a nurse peeked in, the sun was just beginning to rise outside. She's stable, the nurse said softly. You saved her life last night, you know. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure I had. I looked down at Lily again. She looked so fragile, so easy to break, and yet somehow she had survived being left out in the freezing rain. There was a strength in her I couldn't name. Lily, I whispered, brushing my finger gently across her cheek. You don't even belong to me. But I don't know how to let go. The words felt dangerous in my mouth, but they were true. You can't keep her, my mind warned. You can't lose her, my heart argued back. I closed my eyes, holding her closer. I'll stay, I murmured. Just until they find your family. Just until you don't need me anymore. But even as I said it, a quiet voice inside whispered a truth I wasn't ready to admit. You're already hers. And she's already yours. Command. It was a word Marcus Hale had built his entire life around. 20 years in the army, 10 of those as a general, and he had never hesitated in the face of chaos. Until now. Now his world was nothing but chaos. The rain outside his office window streaked against the glass, blurring the sharp lines of the base beyond. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, staring at a photograph pinned to the wall. It was the only picture he had of her, his daughter. Taken seconds after she was born, her face blotchy and red, her tiny hands curled into fists too small for the world. Claire had smiled through tears as she held her, her voice a whisper. She's perfect, Marcus. Isn't she perfect? He had nodded, though his own throat was too tight for words. That was the last time he saw his wife alive. Hours later, she was gone. And days after that, so was Lily. Marcus drew in a sharp breath. Even now, the thought of her name felt like a blade sliding under his ribs. Lily. His Lily. They'd taken her from the hospital nursery in the middle of the night. No witnesses, no alarms, just an empty crib and a cold knot of dread that hadn't left his chest since. As General Marcus was used to mobilizing troops, coordinating missions, deploying resources with precision. But this wasn't a war zone. This was his daughter. And for the first time, all his power, all his influence felt useless. He had called in every favor, every connection. His face had been on local news, his voice breaking as he offered a private reward. Yet weeks passed, and nothing. No leads. No ransom demand, just silence. Marcus turned from the window and sank into his chair, the leather groaning under his weight. He pressed his palms to his eyes, willing back the burn. She's out there. Somewhere. She has to be. But every night, doubt crept in like a thief. And with it, the voice he couldn't silence. You failed her. You failed Claire. The knock on his door came soft but insistent. Sir Marcus lifted his head. It was his aide, Sergeant Brooks, holding a file. We might have something. Marcus's heart kicked hard in his chest. Go on. Brooks stepped inside, setting the folder on the desk. An off-duty medic sent this over. Said it might be nothing, but... Marcus flipped the folder open. Inside was a single photo. Grainy, taken in a small-town clinic. A woman young, her dark hair pulled into a loose bun, sat in a rocking chair cradling a baby to her chest. The baby's face was blurry, but Marcus's eyes locked on one detail. The hospital bracelet on her ankle. Even in the low resolution, he recognized the number. It matched Lily's birth record. Marcus's breath caught. His fingers tightened on the edge of the photo. In the woman's face, he didn't see a kidnapper. He saw something else. Something he couldn't name. Where was this taken? His voice was low, dangerous. A clinic in Harlow Springs, sir. About 30 miles east of here. Marcus stood. Get the car. Sir, should I notify? Number Brooks hesitated. Just me. As the door closed behind him, Marcus stared down at the photo one last time. The woman wasn't smiling. She wasn't posing. She was holding the baby like something sacred, like something she couldn't bear to let go. Hold on, Lily, Marcus whispered under his breath. Hold on. I'm coming for you. The drive to Harlow Springs felt longer than it should have. Marcus sat rigid in the back seat, hands clenched on his knees, the photo resting face up on the seat beside him. His eyes kept drifting back to it, as if staring long enough might pull his daughter from the page and into his arms. The woman in the photo looked young, mid-20s maybe. Her dark hair was messy strands falling loose around her face. She wasn't looking at the camera. She wasn't even aware it had been taken. Her gaze was fixed entirely on the baby in her arms. His baby. There was no fear in her expression, no calculation, just a quiet tenderness that tightened his chest in a way he didn't expect. He'd spent weeks preparing himself to face a monster, a kidnapper, a stranger who had taken Lily from her crib in the dead of night and vanished without a trace. But now, staring at this photograph, he didn't see a monster. He saw a woman holding a child like she was holding the world together with her bare hands. General Sergeant Brooks's voice pulled him from his thoughts. We're 2 minutes out. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. Stay in the car when we get there. Yes, sir. He wasn't sure what he'd say when he saw her. He wasn't even sure what he felt. Rage, relief. Something in between. When they pulled up outside the small clinic, the world seemed eerily still. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine. Marcus stepped out of the car, the photo clenched tightly in his hand. Inside the clinic was warm, the faint sound of a lullaby drifting from somewhere down the hall. A nurse at the front desk glanced up, startled. Can I help you, sir? I'm here for the baby, Marcus said quietly. The nurse's brows knitted. You're her father? Yes. The nurse hesitated for a moment before leading him down the hall. Room 3, she murmured, gesturing toward a half-open door. Marcus's boots barely made a sound on the linoleum as he approached. Through the narrow gap, he saw her. The woman from the photo. She was sitting in a rocking chair, her body curved protectively around the tiny bundle in her arms. The baby, his daughter, was nestled against her chest, her small hand clutching the edge of the woman's shirt. For a moment, Marcus couldn't move. The knot in his chest pulled tighter as he watched. The woman's head tilted slightly, her lips moving in a soft hum that carried into the quiet hall. Her eyes were half closed, but even from here, Marcus could see the exhaustion etched into her features. And something else. Something that made his throat ache. She wasn't holding Lily like someone who planned to take her away. She was holding her like someone who had already saved her life. Marcus's fingers loosened on the photo. For weeks, all he'd known was fear. But now, standing in the doorway, a different feeling crept in. Hope. She's alive, he thought. And she's safe. For now. I didn't hear him come in. The door creaked softly, but I was too focused on the small weight in my arms to notice. It wasn't until I felt the air shift heavier somehow that I looked up. And there he was. He filled the doorway like a shadow, broad shoulders squared in a pressed uniform that seemed almost too stiff for the quiet warmth of the clinic. For a second, I couldn't breathe. His eyes locked on mine, sharp and unreadable. Then they shifted downward to the tiny bundle resting against my chest. Lily, he whispered. The name caught in his throat like a prayer. I tightened my hold on her instinctively. Not because I feared him, there was nothing threatening in the way he stood there, but because my body didn't seem ready to let go of the fragile life I'd been cradling for the past 2 days. He took a slow step forward. I'm Marcus Hale, he said finally, his voice low and rough around the edges. Lily's father. I nodded, unsure what to say. For weeks I'd wondered who she belonged to. What kind of person could lose something so precious? And now, standing in front of me, he looked nothing like the monster my fears had painted. His face was drawn pale beneath the harsh lines of exhaustion. But his eyes, they weren't the eyes of a soldier. They were the eyes of a father. Thank you, he said, suddenly, his voice breaking. I blinked, startled. For saving her, he continued. For holding her when I couldn't. I opened my mouth, but no words came. How could I explain that I hadn't been the one to save her, that maybe it was the other way around? He stepped closer slowly, as though afraid to spook me. May I? He asked softly, gesturing to Lily. I hesitated. She shifted in my arms, then her tiny fingers clutching at my shirt, and I felt the familiar ache in my chest. She's just eaten, I said quietly. She's calm now. Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. He didn't push. He didn't even reach for her. He just stood there, hands at his sides, like a man trying to hold himself together with nothing but sheer will. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was Lily's soft breathing and the faint hum of the heater. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again, he murmured. Every night I told myself she was gone, and every morning I got up and kept looking anyway. I swallowed hard. I found her by chance, I admitted. In the woods. Someone left her there. His eyes darkened. I know, he said. We think it was a man from my unit. He wasn't well, but that doesn't excuse. He broke off, his hands clenching briefly before releasing. I'm just glad she found you. For the first time, I saw it. The cracks beneath his polished exterior. The grief, the guilt, the raw relief of a father who had nearly lost everything. "Would you like to hold her?" I asked softly. His head jerked up, surprise flashing across his face. I don't know how," he admitted. I offered a small, tired smile. "I'll show you." His hands shook. Not much, just a small tremor in his fingers as he reached for her. "Support her neck," I murmured. "And keep her close to your chest. She likes to feel your heartbeat." Marcus nodded stiffly. His movements were awkward at first, but he listened carefully, adjusting his hold until Lily fit snugly against him. She stirred, letting out a soft sigh. For a moment, Marcus froze as if afraid she might cry, but she didn't. She settled, her tiny hand clutching weakly at his uniform. "You're a natural," I said quietly. A flicker of a smile crossed his face, brief but real. "Hardly," he murmured. "I've spent my life commanding soldiers, not this." His voice softened as he looked down at her. "She's smaller than I imagined. Stronger, too." The doctor cleared his throat gently. "I'm glad to see her stable," he said. "But she's still refusing formula. That's a concern." Marcus glanced up, his brows furrowing. "What does that mean?" "She needs to keep breastfeeding for now," the doctor explained. "It's the only thing she's responding to." His eyes flicked briefly to me. I felt my stomach knot. "We can arrange for a wet nurse." Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. The doctor shook his head. "That could take time. Ms. Monroe has already established a bond. If she's willing to continue, it would be best for the baby's recovery." I shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what I'd planned. I'd told myself from the beginning I was just passing through her life. A stranger holding another stranger's child. But when I looked down at Lily, her face calm, her breathing steady against Marcus's chest, my heart clenched. Could I really walk away now? "I can stay," I said softly. Marcus's gaze snapped to me, sharp and unreadable. "For a little while," I added quickly. "Just until she's stronger. And she doesn't need me anymore." There was a pause. He nodded once slowly. "Thank you." We didn't speak of terms. We didn't speak of expectations. It wasn't an agreement written on paper, signed and stamped. It was something quieter, unspoken. But even as I said yes, I felt a tightness in my chest, because I knew how this would end. I'd been here before, cradling a fragile life, letting myself believe I could keep it safe. And then, nothing but empty arms. I glanced at Marcus. He was still looking at Lily, his expression unreadable. I wondered if he felt it too. The fear of holding on, the terror of letting go. The house was quieter than I expected. I'd imagined the home of a general to be all sharp corners and rigid order like the man himself. But the moment I stepped inside, I was struck by how still it felt, like a museum where no one dared touch the furniture. No photos on the walls, no laughter echoing through the halls. Just silence. Marcus stood beside me, hands clasped behind his back. "I had the guest room prepared," he said. "It's separate from the main wing. For privacy." I nodded, clutching Lily a little tighter. "Thank you." We didn't say much as he led me down the hall. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into someone else's life, a life I didn't belong to. The room was simple but warm. A small crib had been set up by the window, its white paint gleaming faintly in the afternoon light. There was a rocking chair in the corner, and folded neatly on the bed was a stack of soft blankets. "I hope this will do," Marcus said quietly. "It's perfect," I murmured. Our eyes met briefly, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his. Relief, gratitude, and maybe a trace of vulnerability. But then he straightened his expression, smoothing over like a soldier snapping to attention. If you need anything, ask, he said. I'll give you space. I watched him leave the door clicking shut behind him, and just like that, I was alone. Alone, except for the tiny life in my arms. I settled into the rocking chair, Lily's warm weight against my chest. Her breath came slow and steady now. Safe, at least for the moment. But even as I traced her delicate features with my eyes, I felt it. The weight of eyes I couldn't see. The whispers I couldn't quite hear. It started the next morning. A housekeeper brought in fresh linens, her gaze darting to Lily and then back to me. Breakfast is at 7, she said curtly. Her tone wasn't unkind, but there was something there. An edge, a question she didn't voice. By the afternoon, I felt it again. 2 officers passing in the hall lowered their voices as I walked by. Their words were too soft to catch, but I didn't need to hear them. I could feel them. The why to young woman. The general. By the second day, it was louder. I caught fragments as I passed the kitchen. Moved her in already. After what he's been through. Poor man. She's so young. What's her angle? I gripped the counter until my knuckles whitened. They didn't know me. They didn't know what this was or what it wasn't. But still, their words clung to me like damp clothes I couldn't peel away. That night, I sat in the rocking chair with Lily curled against my chest, staring out the window at the darkened base beyond. Her tiny hand grasped my finger, and all I could think was, I don't belong here. In the quiet, a thought whispered in the back of my mind. Maybe it was time to go. At first, the whispers were only in the halls, quick glances, half-finished sentences, but then they spilled beyond these walls. It started with a photo. I didn't even know it had been taken until I saw it online. A blurry shot of me walking across the base, Lily in my arms, Marcus a few steps behind me. The headline read, "Young Nurse Moves In, with General After Baby's Rescue. Too Close for Comfort." The comments were worse. She's clearly after his money. What kind of woman moves in with a grieving man? He's vulnerable. She's taking advantage. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it didn't matter, but every time I left the guest wing, I felt it. Eyes on my back. Judging. Measuring. Even the housekeeper who had been polite enough at first now seemed colder. Her words clipped. Her gaze lingering just a little too long on Lily in my arms. Marcus didn't mention the photo. He didn't mention the comments. He didn't even ask if I'd seen them. But the silence between us spoke louder than words. One evening, I found him in the kitchen, standing rigid by the window. His phone was on the counter, the screen still glowing with a news article. When he noticed me, he quickly turned it face down. "They'll move on," he said finally, his voice quiet but taut. "I'm not sure they will," I murmured. I didn't say it out loud, but the thought pressed heavy on my chest. Maybe I should leave. That night, I sat in the rocking chair long after Lily had drifted off. Her tiny breaths were steady against my shoulder, but my own felt ragged. What was I doing here? This wasn't my child. This wasn't my home. And every second I stayed, I made things harder for Marcus. Maybe the whispers were right. Maybe I didn't belong. I brushed a fingertip gently across Lily's cheek. She stirred, nuzzling closer. I'm sorry, baby girl, I whispered. Maybe leaving is the only way to protect you. But even as I said it, my arms tightened around her. The thought of letting go felt like stepping off a cliff with no hope of landing. I packed slowly, as if moving my hands any faster would make it too real. The guest room was quiet, except for the sound of Lily's soft breaths from the crib by the window. The sun hadn't risen yet. The house was still heavy with the kind of silence that feels alive. Each time I folded another piece of clothing, a voice in my head whispered, "You're making the right choice." But my heart didn't believe it. I glanced over my shoulder. She was still sleeping, one tiny fist curled near her cheek, her lips moving slightly like she was dreaming. A dream. That's what these past weeks had felt like. Finding her in the woods, holding her for the first time. The way her body seemed to mold perfectly against mine as if she had always belonged there. But she didn't. She belonged to him. To this world I had no place in. And the longer I stayed, the more dangerous it became for both of us. The whispers had grown louder over the past few days. In the halls, in the dining room, in the way people paused their conversations when I entered a room. Even in the way Marcus looked at me now, as if he wasn't sure whether to thank me or apologize. We hadn't talked about the photo, about the comments. We didn't need to. I could feel the weight of them in every silence that stretched between us. I slid the last of my clothes into the small suitcase and zipped it shut. The sound felt too loud in the stillness. On the dresser, I saw the folded note I'd written earlier. It wasn't long, just a few words scrawled in shaky handwriting. "She's safe now. You don't need me anymore." I hesitated before placing it on the nightstand, my fingers lingering on the edge of the paper. Would he even care? Would he feel relief? Or would he stand in this room tomorrow, holding this note in his hand, wondering why I'd walked away, without a word? I shook the thought away. This wasn't about him. It wasn't even about me. It was about Lily. She deserved a life free of scandal and whispers, and if my presence was standing in the way of that, then leaving was the only choice. I walked to the crib and looked down at her. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. She looked so peaceful, so unaware of the storm swirling outside these walls, or the one raging inside me. "I'm sorry, baby girl," I whispered, brushing a finger lightly across her tiny hand. "You won't remember me. Maybe that's for the best." Her fingers twitched but didn't grasp mine this time. I stood there for a long moment, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the softness of her hair, the way she seemed to radiate warmth even in her sleep. And then, before I could change my mind, I turned away. As I stepped into the hall, the sound of my suitcase wheels on the hardwood echoed like a drumbeat. The house seemed even quieter now, as if it too knew what I was doing. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the front door, my hands were trembling so hard I could barely grasp the handle. I paused, taking one last shaky breath. "Goodbye, Lily," I murmured. And then I stepped out into the night. The house was too quiet when Marcus woke. At first he thought maybe he'd slept through the night for the first time in weeks. But then he heard it. a sound that sliced through the silence like a blade. Lily's cry. It wasn't her usual cry, the soft, fussy wail of a baby needing milk or comfort. This was sharper, harsher. It was the sound of pain. Marcus bolted upright, his feet hitting the cold floor as he rushed to the nursery. Lily was thrashing weakly in her crib, her face flushed, a deep red, tiny fists clenched tight. Her skin felt too hot when he touched her forehead. God. No. His hands fumbled for the baby thermometer, but it slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor. Sir. The housekeeper appeared in the doorway, her face pale. She won't stop crying, she said shakily. I've tried everything. A cool cloth rocking her. Nothing works. Marcus barely heard her. His chest tightened as Lily let out another piercing scream. Where was Haley? Where's Ms. Monroe? He asked sharply, though, a sinking dread already coiled in his gut. The housekeeper hesitated. She left early this morning. She didn't say where she was going. His blood ran cold. Left. She'd left. Marcus stumbled back, gripping the edge of the crib. Of course she had. He'd felt her pulling away for days, seen the weight in her eyes each time the whispers grew louder. And now she was gone. Call the pediatrician, he ordered hoarsely. Now. The housekeeper nodded and darted out. Marcus scooped Lily into his arms. She felt so small, so fragile, her body trembling as she let out another broken wail. He rocked her clumsily, whispering her name over and over. Lily. It's okay, baby girl. Daddy's here. You're okay. You're okay. But she wasn't. Her cries didn't ease. He sat in the rocking chair, clutching her close as her tiny fists beat weakly against his chest. He could feel himself unraveling thread by thread. And then he reached for his phone. It rang once, twice, 3 times. And then hello. Her voice. Soft, cautious. Haley. He said, his voice breaking on her name. There was a pause. Marcus. Yes. It's Lily. She's burning up. She won't stop crying. I don't know what to do. He could hear her sharp intake of breath on the other end. Did you call her doctor? Yes. They said to bring her in, but his throat tightened. She won't calm down. She won't take the bottle. She needs you. Silence. For a moment, he thought she'd hung up. Please, Haley. His voice cracked. She needs you. I need you. Another beat of silence. Then I'll be there in 10 minutes. The line went dead. But Marcus didn't move. He just sat there in the dim nursery, Lily's cries echoing off the walls, his hand trembling as he pressed the phone to his forehead. For the first time since Claire's death, he felt the tight band around his chest loosen. Just a little. Because Haley was coming back. I didn't knock when I arrived. The door was already unlocked, as if he had been waiting for me. The house was dim and silent except for the sound of Lily's cries echoing down the hall. They weren't sharp anymore. They were hoarse, desperate little sobs that broke something inside me. My shoes squeaked softly on the polished floor as I walked, clutching the diaper bag tighter than I needed to. The nursery door was ajar. I could see Marcus sitting in the rocking chair, his broad shoulders hunched forward as he held Lily against his chest. His face was buried in her tiny neck. He looked like a man fighting a war with no weapons left. "Marcus," I said softly. He looked up, and for the first time I saw it, the raw fear in his eyes. The carefully constructed armor of a general cracked and crumbling. "She won't stop," he said hoarsely. "She won't eat. I don't know what else to do." I crossed the room, my hand already reaching for her. "Let me try." He didn't hesitate. He stood and handed her to me as if passing over the most fragile thing in the world. The moment her tiny body touched mine, Lily's cries faltered. She let out one last broken sob, and then stilled her head, nuzzling into the curve of my neck. I felt her trembling slow her breaths, evening out. And just like that, the room fell quiet. Marcus sank into the chair across from me, his hands dropping uselessly into his lap. He watched in silence as I adjusted Lily against my chest, murmuring soothing words under my breath. Her tiny fingers curled around the fabric of my shirt. I didn't realize I was crying until one of my tears landed softly on her blanket. "You didn't just save her," Marcus said quietly. His voice was rough, uneven. "You saved me too." My eyes lifted to his. He wasn't looking at me like a man grateful for a favor. He was looking at me like someone seeing light for the first time in a long, long while. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. So I stayed silent and rocked Lily gently as the quiet wrapped around us like a fragile truce. We didn't talk about what we were, not in those first few days after I came back. There were no labels, no grand declarations, just a quiet rhythm that formed between us. Mornings were slow. I would wake to the sound of Marcus in the kitchen fumbling with the coffee machine, his deep voice humming some half-remembered tune as he moved around awkwardly. Lily would stir in her crib, and I'd scoop her up before she could fuss. Together we'd pad barefoot down the hall, her soft weight cradled against my shoulder. Marcus would glance up when we entered, his face softening in a way I wasn't used to seeing. He never said much, just offered me a steaming mug and a nod like it was the most natural thing in the world for me to be there. Afternoons blurred into a series of small moments. Lily's quiet coos as I rocked her in the sunlit nursery, Marcus asking hesitant questions about feeding schedules and nap routines, both of us laughing the first time he tried to change her diaper and used way too many wipes. Evenings were quieter still. We'd sit across from each other in the living room after Lily had fallen asleep, the baby monitor glowing faintly between us. Sometimes we talked about little things like my old job at the clinic or his favorite childhood books. Other times we didn't talk at all. We didn't need to. There was something in the silence that felt safe, like an understanding neither of us wanted to break. I noticed how his shoulders seemed less tense now, how the lines around his eyes softened each time he looked at Lily. I noticed how my own heart didn't feel so heavy anymore, how the ache I thought would never leave had begun to ease. One night, after Lily finally drifted off after a long bout of fussing, Marcus stayed in the nursery with me. He didn't say anything, just sat quietly in the rocking chair across from mine, watching as I brushed a hand gently over Lily's hair. When our eyes met, I saw it again, that unspoken thing between us. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something quieter, something steadier, a choice. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of it. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment when everything shifted from temporary to permanent. Instead, it grew slowly like roots, pushing quietly into the earth, steady and unseen. 1 year later, the house feels different, warmer somehow. Laughter echoes in the kitchen now, where once there was only the low hum of appliances. The faint scent of baby powder lingers in the hallways. Marcus isn't the same man I met that rainy night. He still walks like a soldier, still carries himself with quiet authority, but there's a softness to him now, an ease that wasn't there before. I see it in the way he holds Lily on his hip as he reads the morning paper, in the way his voice drops when he sings to her at night, off-key, but tender. Lily has grown so much. She's started to toddle, her tiny legs carrying her clumsily from room to room. Sometimes she stumbles, and Marcus is there in an instant, his large hands steadying her as she giggles. I watch them from the doorway, my heart swelling in a way that still surprises me. I never thought I'd find this. A place where I belonged. A family that felt like mine. We never defined what we were, Marcus and I. There was no proposal, no speeches under candlelight. It was simpler than that. It was in the way he started setting out 2 cups of coffee every morning. In the way my clothes slowly found their way into his drawers. In the way Lily's first word wasn't mama or dada, but home. One evening after Lily had fallen asleep, we sat on the back porch, the cool air carrying the scent of pine and rain. Marcus reached for my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "This house felt empty before you," he said quietly. "You gave it life again." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. We stayed like that for a long time, watching the stars blink into existence one by one. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I know this. If love is a choice, I will keep choosing this life, this family, them. The key was warm in my hand, its smooth edges pressing gently into my palm, as if it had been waiting there all along. Marcus didn't say anything at first. He just stood across from me in the quiet kitchen, his broad shoulders relaxed for once, his eyes steady on mine. The air between us felt different tonight, not heavy like it had in the beginning, not uncertain like it did in those early days, but soft, certain. "You're not here as a guest, Haley," he said finally, his voice low but clear. "You belong." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked down at the small silver key resting in my hand, a simple object that carried so much weight. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation, a choice. One he was offering me without conditions or expectations. One I realized I had already made long ago. This house hadn't felt like a stranger's home in months. It felt like Lily's first steps across the living room carpet. Like Marcus's quiet laughter when I teased him about his terrible scrambled eggs. Like late-night talks on the porch when the world was still and we didn't need words to fill the spaces between us. It felt like mine. "Are you sure?" I whispered. Marcus stepped closer, his hand covering mine as he gently curled my fingers around the key. "I've never been more sure of anything," he murmured. "You saved her. You saved me. And this place. This life. It only feels right when you're here." My chest tightened, warmth flooding through me in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. For so long I'd been afraid of holding on, afraid that loving again would only lead to loss. But looking into his eyes now, I didn't feel fear. I felt home. Lily stirred softly in her crib down the hall, her tiny voice letting out a sleepy sigh. We both turned our heads toward the sound, a smile tugging at Marcus's lips. He looked back at me then, and for the first time I saw no grief in his eyes, only hope. Slowly I nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll stay." Marcus's smile deepened, not wide or flashy, but quiet and full, like a man finally exhaling after holding his breath for too long. His hand lingered over mine for a moment before he spoke again. "Then, let's build something that lasts." I tightened my grip on the key and nodded once more. Together. If you had asked me a year ago what it means to save a life, I would have told you it's about quick action and strength. About courage. About doing the impossible when no one else can. But now I think saving a life is quieter than that. It's rocking a baby in the middle of the night even when your arms are numb. It's choosing to show up again and again even when your heart is tired and broken. It's allowing yourself to be needed when all you've known lately is loss. Before Lily, I didn't think I had anything left to give. Grief had hollowed me out. Every day felt like I was moving through water, heavy and slow. I told myself I was surviving, but the truth is I wasn't really living at all. I kept people at arm's length. I kept love even further. Because if I let myself care again, if I let myself hope again, what would happen if it all slipped away? Losing my son had taught me one thing: love isn't safe, and for a long time I believed that meant I couldn't risk it ever again. But then, on a rainy night, I heard her cry. Just a faint sound so small I almost convinced myself it was nothing, and something in me shifted. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was grace. I don't know. All I know is that I found her. Or maybe she found me. That moment, kneeling in the mud with a freezing newborn in my arms, wasn't heroic. It was desperate and messy and terrifying. But looking back, I think it saved us both. Because in the weeks that followed, I learned something I wish I had known sooner. I learned that love doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It doesn't have to come with fireworks or declarations. Sometimes love is just staying. It's washing bottles at 2 a.m. It's whispering lullabies into the dark. It's choosing to open your heart even when you're scared of how much it might hurt. And it will hurt sometimes. Loving people means letting them into the softest, most unprotected parts of you. It means trusting they won't break what's fragile. But it also means giving yourself the chance to heal, to grow, to begin again. When I first met Marcus, I thought he was a man made entirely of steel, a soldier, a leader, someone who didn't need anyone. But the truth is, we're all a little breakable, even the strongest of us. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't fighting alone. It's allowing someone else to stand beside us. Marcus taught me that. Lily taught me that. And maybe in some small way I taught them too. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this: you don't have to be unbroken to be worthy of love. You don't have to have all the answers to matter. And you don't have to do everything alone. Sometimes the simplest, hardest, most beautiful choice you can make is to stay. Stay when it's easier to run. Stay when your fear tells you to let go. Stay because there is no safety in this world greater than the safety of being fully present for someone who needs you. I don't know what the future holds for us. None of us do. But every morning when I hear Lily's soft giggles down the hall, when I see Marcus smiling at her like she's his whole world, I remind myself I chose this. And I will keep choosing it every single day. Because love isn't a one-time decision. It's 1,000 small ones. And every one of them matters.